pages. I'm going to try to get everyone up here. But okay. Yeah, welcome to another one of our live streams. We do these every Thursday. These run from 6 to, depending on everyone's schedules, 8 p.m. That's U.S. Eastern Time. We've got, by this point, a pretty loyal audience. So some of you guys have told me that you're tuning in. I'm getting messages. This one better be interesting. Canada, what's up there? So a lot of things are going on. With me, obviously, you see Kevin Jackson, one of the co-founders of the presenting company, Unified Solutions America. He always comes in with some boxing or martial arts moves, which he genuinely knows how to do, unlike a lot of guys. We've also got Jeff. You might know Jeff is the unmitigated ass on X. You should follow that account, which is up there. But in fact, he's the owner of the Correspondence Theory series of websites. You've probably seen Core Theory in a couple of different settings. There's just that distinction between like the witty debater and this is what we're doing on the business front here. But he's here in both capacities. And we've got Wocal Distance. Wocal's a guy almost all of you, again, know from X, about the same size account I have. But he is also Michael Young, the Canadian academic. I don't think I'm blowing any cover because he's on our website as such. Wocal is driving, so we're not going to get to see another lovely, very masculine face. He's one of two guys with beards as opposed to two guys with baldies here. So, obviously, I'll do the usual Unified Solutions America plug. Yeah, it's a very simple haircut for the gentleman. I used to have a beard that actually had flame cuts in it with a Chicago barber, and it got to be too much. Like when I got near 40, I don't need to be stylishly presented with a faded beard. But so today, Unified Solutions America, you can check us out at unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. We've plugged the company every week. We're starting to make significant progress in terms of closing large Fortune market clients, in terms of people investing in the business, so on down the line. Everyone you see here is associated with the brand in some way. And if you are interested in investment, unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. We're not fully hiring at that W-2 level yet. I don't want to ever lie to anybody, but check us out if you're interested in anti-woke work. I hear a lot of complaints from young right-wing men. There are no companies like this out there. Yes, there are. There's ours. There are a number of others. Check out Chris Ruffo, but check us out first. And if you know someone, a CMO at your business or some such, who could be pitched this, or the CEO, if you're talking $50 to $100 million company, if you're having these problems, because we've got a lot of junior executives and young faculty, by all means, tell us. DM me, go through the corporate website. We're probably going to put a hotline on there. Anyway, capitalist as I am, we're going to move into the topic. Today's topic is Canada, America's hat, but also one of the world's probably 9 or so powers, a major nation, larger in size than the USA. Canada recently has been doing a lot of, and we're going to switch from that near the end to dumb elites. I think Kevin probably has something to say about this. What is it? Jason Arday scandal over in the UK, where one guy claimed he was the world's best ultra runner. He couldn't talk until he was 11. Just on and on and on with this nonsense. Youngest black professor at Cambridge. Everything he wrote turned out to be plagiarized. I'm one of the people that's reading this as part of kind of my pro bono as an academic. But anyway, we're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about what DEI and legacy have done to the elite. Is there a reason we don't trust experts? But first, Canada. Canada's doing some crazy stuff. We've seen the residential schools scandal up there, where the initial claim was that thousands of children, up to tens of thousands, were buried at these schools on Indian reservations. That apparently is entirely false. They've done 2 digs. They found nobody. They found a raccoon. We're going to talk about mass migration. Canada is a great power, but is also a country of about 40 million people. I don't want to exaggerate in either direction. They've allowed in about 11 million immigrants, primarily from South Asia. That's another point. We've seen incredible speech policies over there. And just so on down the line. Let's see what the Canadian topics were. Oh, Alberta, their rural, very successful kind of prairie province, actually wants to secede from the country now. So you have 2 portions of the country. You have French Canada, the Quebecois population, and then you have the Albertan kind of cowboys that are on par with ours that sort of want to leave. So I think it's interesting to talk about, end of opening monologue here, but what are we seeing and what does this imply for the USA? And normally Kevin and I will start out talk for 15 or so, but let's flip to one of the Canucks here. Jeff, what's going on up there? What's your take on the country? Obviously still a great nation, but what's going on?
everything's falling apart.
Oh, okay.
That's a little harsh. I don't know. We've just globalized to the nth degree. Um, I'm an Albertan, so I'm pretty pissed at the East all the time because,
Albertan.
yeah. Well, it's funny if you start running into the stats. It's trillions of dollars been scared away by policies from the East that would have been helping Alberta out. We have trillions of dollars in resources that gets kiboshed all the time. They pretend like they're not doing it. And then I think the stat is about $5,000 per Albertan gets equalized net away from Alberta to go to places like Quebec, Ontario, and the Maritimes. And truthfully, I wouldn't be that mad about the Maritimes getting some help, but Quebec has a huge gas industry they could be developing and they just refuse to. And so we have a lot of grievances up here. And yeah, on the migration front, I think we're up to 10% East Indian.
Okay.
That's
Specifically
outrageous.
India, not like every country in the subcontinent or in Asia, just Indians.
Yeah, specifically, yeah. Now, we do have a bunch of migration from everywhere else as well, right? Because we're basically Britain, but on this side of the pond.
Are you guys experiencing the same thing that we are here, where these Indians disproportionately are the CEOs of companies and they're running HR departments? And in our case, we have what's called H-1B visas. And it seems like everywhere you turn, you've got these Indians. And what tipped me off to their politics was they vote Democrat. And I'm thinking, how can you leave India and come to America and vote for a Democrat? You know, you're leaving a country that, quite frankly, is what Donald Trump would call a third world crap hole, and coming here, and then you're voting for that. And I mean, they've just flooded. They are disproportionately more CEOs that are Indians, more C-suite level people of East Indian descent than there is almost any other non-white ethnicity. And I just think that it's become a racket.
I think you're correct. It's really difficult to actually sort this out because what you have is specifically with India is they have a caste system and you have a couple different religions, right? So the way that actually they act when they come over here, it definitely changes. There's definitely people who've migrated over here, assimilated. You have people who run businesses and do well. I think that there is definitely a bunch that have gotten into building not so legit businesses and are doing like immigration services. And then obviously we have the same issue with the trucking, but that's been an issue for a while.
Interesting.
Well, let me actually jump in there with one question. How do you get a CDL? And this is a specific question, but how do you get a commercial driver's license as a foreign national, especially if you're not there legally? Like in the USA, a pretty large percentage of our truck drivers are of some kind of South Asian descent, Hispanic, Mexican American descent. And it's pretty hard to take the CDL exam. I know because I've had working class buddies do it. How does that happen? Is there a company that buys a certain number of permits for X number of drivers and it's assumed they're competent, or what do they do?
I knew someone who worked at the registry, which is like the Canadian version of the DMV, and she got fired because she told her boss that employees there were selling class 3s for $500, and I think it was $800 to get your class 1, which is commercial driver's license. So I think it's just straight up fraud.
I agree. I think it's just complete fraud. I think, look, the countries that have allowed this mass immigration and the politics that have allowed it to occur is full of nothing but frauds. They are take payola in a second, and it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be completely anti-Canada, and our faction here in the U.S., the leftists, completely anti-American. There's not a single, and I'm challenging anybody that's listening to this right now. You find me a single thing that the left stands for that is for the greater good, or pro-American, or in the case of Canada, pro-Canada policies that rewards people playing by the rules, and I'll buy them a steak dinner, because this isn't. And so we look at these asinine things that are happening in our country, and I don't know whether it's our stupidity migrating to Canada or vice versa, but it doesn't matter. The stupidity is now taken shape. And the only thing that gives me heart is I start to see things, the pendulum slowly coming back the other way, little by little. But common sense should just swing right back into place in many of these cases. Who should be able to get a license without proving they can drive? My brother got his CDL. He was practicing putting a truck into a one of the things where they load them up,
bay
and
or whatever.
in the bay, and he barely clipped another truck, and they fired him on the spot. And so, but these guys can go jackknife in the middle of the highway and they can continue driving. It's insanity.
Well, we allow a lot of this to happen.
One guy that did that, I think, went to jail, but not for long. But let's go to Wokel, because Wokel, what do you think about what's going on in Canada and this trucker thing?
So I'm a Canadian as well. I am from the province of Saskatchewan. And this issue came onto my radar a number of years ago. I was actually working for the Saskatchewan government when there was a crash, the Humboldt Broncos crash. A hockey team was traveling, a minor hockey team, an amateur hockey team, so I think it was under 16 or under 18, was traveling, and they were hit. And a number of the players were killed. A number of the players had their careers ended. It was a huge tragedy. And the guy who did it, who was the fault of the accident, was East Indian, was sent to prison. And now there's a big hubbub, or has been a big hubbub, about whether or not he should be deported. And so the very fact that whether or not he should be deported is a question is part of the insanity that's going on. But I want to back up here for a moment, because I want to provide sort of some background for why Canada is the way it is. And I think the best way to do this is to say, if you were a Canadian, and you came of age, became an adult, hit your 20s, anytime between 1984 and about 2015, you made out like a bandit. Canada had as far as single-payer healthcare systems go, one of the best single-payer healthcare systems in the world. I don't know how it compares to the States in terms of quality, but compared to single-payer systems, Canada had one of the best. Canada had a strong economy that was growing consistently. Canada was safe. Canada was a peaceful nation for the most part. It was relatively low crime, and housing was, for the most part, very affordable. My father in 1993 bought a suburban home on the salary of a carpet cleaner, and that wasn't unusual. So if you came of age in the 80s or 90s as a Canadian, you made out like a bandit. Like, you probably, if you are a boomer Canadian today, like if you came of age in 1993, you retired with a home that tripled in value and probably at least 2 or 3 rock solid pensions. I know a number.
To that, Mike, I think we would say, Canadians, we say to you as Americans, you're welcome. Because you didn't have to protect yourselves. You didn't have to put a lot of money into the military industrial complex. You didn't have all the money that's gone into all those systems was courtesy of the American citizens providing a blanket of protection. Also paying 300% tariffs on many of your products. We were a very good, trade partner, because you've been getting billions and billions throughout all those years on the backs of American citizens, and we never said a word. We never complained.
Okay, yeah.
Although I will, though,
actually, if you think
with
back
us to all of our wars, Iraq, and so on. But Wokel, what do you think about that?
Just let me. I'm tying something together here. Just give me a minute.
Okay, we'll let you.
Back in 1984, when Brian Mulroney was running, and he won an election. There's actually, you can go back and find this, videos of Canadians saying, "We want NAFTA, we want free trade," because the idea was Canada didn't have a manufacturing base for its goods. And so the idea was Canada has lots of resources, the United States is manufacturing, there's a trade partnership there, right? Since about 2015, everything in Canada has deteriorated. Our healthcare system has deteriorated, our education system has deteriorated. We have had a negative GDP per capita over the period from 2015 until now, even before Trump's tariffs. Okay, housing prices have been going out of control for a very long time, but it exacerbated beginning in about 2015. Everything in Canada, there's a meme in Canada that every chart in Canada looks the same. It just goes up, 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 up. Then in 2015, it's down, 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 down. Okay? This is actually not a result of American tariffs or anything to do with Trump, because this deterioration, the crashing of Canada's economy, the lack of growth, the stagnation in innovation, the deterioration of the healthcare system, waiting lists have more than doubled since 2015 in Canada. That happened under Trudeau. It happened when Obama was president. It happened when Trump was president the first time. It happened under Biden, and it's still happening. The American tariffs may have done a little bit to hurt us, but this was already baked into the cake, okay?
Agreed.
Why is that important? Why is this important? It's important because if you look at the voting in Canada, if only people under 40 voted, the Conservative Party would win about 185 seats, which is enough for a solid majority. You have to get about 173 seats to have a majority. They would win about 185. If it's only Canadians over 50 that vote, the Liberal Party wins 300 seats. And the reason
now
for this
aren't
is
they
simple.
opposite in Canada? Your conservatives are our liberals, and our liberals are your conservatives, or is that right?
No. The conservatives are conservative. The liberals are our liberals are like you're like somewhere between Obama and AOC.
Okay.
And then the NDP
so
party
brain dead
is
morons for those paying attention. That would be the brain dead moron faction.
And then the NDP is like a rump niche party. They get about 20 seats. They are like to the left of Bernie Sanders. Okay. So they're like where your Greens would be. Okay. If you're a Canadian boomer, none of this deterioration affects you.
Okay.
And the reason for that is simple. Because by this time, if you're over 50 in Canada, your cohort has moved up the corporate chain. You're no longer competing. Like, your job is secure. Your retirement is secure. Everything you have is secure. You already own your home. All of that is fine. You're not competing with, a bunch of fresh South Asian money for cash for homes. Right. You're not competing with BlackRock. You're not competing for entry-level jobs where that racial nepotism is being invoked by certain groups. None of that is happening for you. You went through, and you're looking around saying, what's everyone complaining about? Life is good. Look at my home is good. Retirement is good. Like, if you're a boomer Canadian, you look around at Canada and you live in an upscale neighborhood, so you don't see the crime. All of the crime statistics, all of these are just statistics for you. This is just people cherry picking. Your experience of Canada is of a safe, secure nation that is, what would you say, flush with cash. Your healthcare is, as far as you can see, fine. I mean, yeah, your wait times maybe are a little long, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Probably.
Healthcare is not as big of an issue as people make it, because you're not going to the doctor every day. You're more likely to go to get sued before you are to have a catastrophic injury.
Yep.
So healthcare is one of those things where until you need it, you don't really think much about it.
That's right.
I think this is actually a good break point for one question here for both of you, because I think there's an age split on the panel. Like, I mean, obviously, as a gentleman of a certain age, I don't give my exact number of years, but myself and Kevin, the two bald guys, have both been in business for a while, out of college for a while, over 40. I feel like you guys are both at least a bit younger. Jeff probably kind of significantly, and this is something that I see often, where there's this like boomer kind of Gen Z, Gen Alpha split. You see this in America too, right? Where there's a constant discussion on Twitter and Facebook about every single topic, dating, politics, and you see racial arguments, but the big split that you see is really age, where a lot of younger people, and in America we handle this a lot better, I think, but a lot of younger people are growing up in a society that's about 39% different minorities, Black Americans, Asian Americans. A lot of their friends, their older brothers and so on, were at war for 18 years in Afghanistan. A lot of my friends were, older friends were, as well, or younger friends were as well. And older people in the States also tend to have that idea of, well, like pure unregulated capitalism, fairly open immigration worked for us. And a lot of younger people, like, for example, getting to the point, the most radical group in the United States in terms of politics is young men who are turning sharply to the right. And the flip side of that, for some reason, is that young women are turning to like the extreme Green Party left. So the old 5-point split between the sexes is now, I think, 23 points. Someone might correct that. And that's driven entirely by younger people. So, Wokel, like, finish up your point, then I'm going to ask Jeff as well. But, like, what's going to come of that? Like, the fact that the younger cohort in a lot of these countries feels like they're being totally ripped off. Are we getting fascists?
Sure.
Are we getting commies?
Okay, so I'll tell you exactly, because that's going to be answered by if I just finish up this point.
Yeah.
There's a guy who goes to my gym. He's in his 70s. He's in excellent condition. He's 70 and he still does dragon boat races. Like, he's in really great shape. Really smart guy. He would be like a moderate liberal type. So somebody like, he would fit in with like the blue dog Democrats of like the 90s. Okay.
Yeah.
He's like, I've seen the DEI stuff. He's like, not a fan of it. But he's like, why are these young men moving? And I said, when did you buy your house? He goes, I bought my house back in 1993. I go, what'd you pay for it? He's like, this is what I paid for it. I'll make up a number so that I don't give him away, because I don't want to say anything bad about him. He's not here. He's a friend. So let's say it was $200,000. It wasn't really that, but we'll just say that. And I said, where were you working? And he told me what his job was. And I said, how much is your house worth today? He's like, well, I've had some upgrades. I was like, but your house generally. He's like, to buy my house today would cost probably $670,000. And I asked him point blank, would the entry-level job that you had that bought you that house in 1993, could somebody who gets that job today buy that same house today? A 4-bedroom house in the same neighborhood that your house is in. 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,800 square foot house, which is, I think, roughly what he's got. I was like, could someone buy that house today with the same job you had? And he goes, no. And I go, that's your answer. And so what's happened is, if you're a Gen Z man, your romantic prospects are linked to your economic and social viability. And the fact is that all of the companies have engaged in the practice of moving white men to the bottom of the pile. This, for the most part, is what's driving a lot of it. Because if you're like, people can say whatever they want about, well, this is a patriarchy, blah, 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 blah. All of these women who say, I want this, I want, I don't care, I need a man who's effeminate, blah. If you're not economically viable, they're not interested. That's just the fact of it. Okay?
Yeah.
And so what's happened for the young men, it's not just that, it's not their economic prospects by themselves that are doing this. It's that their entire social world, their capacity and their opportunity to be socially, romantically, and economically viable is being eroded out from under them. Okay? The reason that's why those men are radicalizing to the right. And in fact, in Canada, the reason why people are radicalizing to the right and left is that it depends on your read of the economic situation. Like, the women are radicalizing because during woke really spoke to them. Woke appealed to their empathy and appealed to their sense of wanting. We want things to be fair. We want yada yada yada. So that's why the women tended to move left, and that was happening in 2014, 2015, and they were all moving left. Now that in Canada,
let me say this. Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah,
because I disagree with your terminology. Moving to the right is not radicalizing to the right. Moving to the right is becoming sane. It's looking at things through different set of eyes. When you move left, you radicalize. A woman who believes that she doesn't need a man, that she doesn't care about motherhood, that abortion is just her reproductive rights, and I heard a girl, they did an interview, I just watched it on social media today. She said she was a victim of sexual assault, but she still believed that a rapist should be released because prison wouldn't do him any good. I mean, this is the type of nonsense. People are letting people out of. We had one of our governors who let a rapist of a child out because he said he just had a bad day. And I'm not exaggerating this. That is radical. When you move from that to back to where we are, you're not being radicalized to the right. You're being normalized.
Sure. Okay. So I misspoke there
about the language, though. I mean, Kevin, in general, I agree. Like, we've swung in the USA, at least, and I think this is probably true in Canada. We've swung left for probably the past 20 to 25 years.
Easy,
and if you look at practical stuff, not just migration policy for employable Asian men or something like that, I understand why young men don't like that, but those are the kind of topics governments discuss. But like transgenderism, gay marriage, the sort of things that you would hear from a clove-smoking art student date back in college in 1999 are the kind of things you hear in the mainstream now, like critical race theory. This is a white supremacist country. So yeah, I think a backlash from young men saying, no, we want a sane immigration policy. That's good. Police should arrest criminals. I watched that video where the woman said, no, I wouldn't want a serial rapist arrested. And it was painful to watch. Like, her body language is obviously terrified. She's in a big city where this is a problem, but she's been taught that ethnic men or poor people aren't responsible for anything they do. So that's all good. I do think, though, that because, how to put this, because for a long time, a lot of this shit was so unsayable, the only people that were discussing, say, small but real differences in IQ or immigration policy were on the actual French, like American Renaissance or VDare has a whole collection of articles about migration, if you're familiar with those locations. So I think when you're on the right, you have all the sane stuff combined with things like women shouldn't vote. And when I do focus groups, this actually is a problem for business women. Like, I'm not going to stop voting or vote to legalize marital rape again. And if you Google those terms on X, you'll see a lot of that stuff.
Look, I'm saying a mainstream
petition has 4 million signatures.
I don't believe it's mainstream thought that, in other words, for us not to want kids to be sexualized, for us not to want drag queen shows in the second grade or drag queen shows for our military bases, for our money to go to, study cross-dressing Guatemalan midgets, that there's nothing radical in me saying I don't want any of that. There's nothing radical. And see, and the reason why I bring it up is because and I don't mean any disrespect to Mike, but when we buy into their language that, the young men are being radicalized to the right. No, they're not. Young men are being awakened to the idea that they're under fire. They're being emasculated. They're being treated like crap and marginalized to the point that you're going to probably finish making here.
And one last line. I just want to patiently here, I do think we've been better at keeping our nuts out of the public space. That's really it for the point. Like, I think, and I mean by our nuts, I mean obviously like crazy people. But maybe this is just we didn't have as many media venues. We had Fox, OANN recently, but when you talk about like the women shouldn't vote thing, the New York Times isn't running articles called take the 19th back. They are running articles like, yes, we do mean defund the police. Vocal, what do you think? What's the conclusion of the point there?
So what I want to talk about then is I want to say women moved radicalized to the left and bought in all of it. What's happening is I shouldn't have said that men are radicalizing. I think that's right. But men are polarizing. That is to say men are moving to the right, and this is creating polarization between men and women.
Yep, agree with that.
And what has happened is what young men are beginning to realize, or what is happening, how can I put this? That women radicalized was never discussed. This was just sort of seen as like, well, we moved to the left from, we stopped being a racist country and we moved, and they considered that to the left. And then we allowed women to vote not to move. So this is just the next stage of moving to the left. And because liberals have always allowed their radical vanguard to function as a sort of conscience for them, maybe they go a bit too far with the communism stuff, but they always thought that they were directionally or that the causes that the radical leftists were picking up were at least sympathetic from a certain perspective. And so when women radicalized, it wasn't recognized as such. And so when they started saying, why are all these young men moving to the right? They completely ignored the point that Kevin made, which is that women moved to the left by like 23 points and did that prior. What is happening now in Canada is a generational gap, because a lot of the women are beginning to look around and say, like, this doesn't work. They were taught and they were led to believe that they could just girl boss their way through life, and I don't need a man, and a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. And you're beginning even to see this show up on the left in the United States with guys like Scott Galloway saying, women come to me and they say, I want to date a guy, but I do want him to be masculine, look. And in Canada, we haven't quite hit that yet. You still can't bring that up. In Canada, the degree to which the credentialed professional managerial class and our creative cultural industries are thoroughly embedded in sort of hyper progressive leftism is almost impossible for the average American to comprehend. And so, I mean, recently they tried to have they did release a report on anti-feminist ideologies, and they tried to bring the Healthy Gamer in, if you know him from YouTube, to try and, he's a legitimate psychologist, to talk about this, but he couldn't even touch on the fact that, like, women radicalized to the left in huge numbers. That can't even be talked about, because if you bring that up, that's considered anti-feminist. And Canada is sort of on an island by itself because it has no capacity to correct. So what you're seeing is at the under 40 level, even the young women in Canada are starting to move to the right. Pierre Poilievre, the Canadian conservative leader, won the outright majority position among people under the age of 30 in the last election. That hasn't happened since at least 1984. So things in Canada are shifting, but the problem is that the problems that Canada has on a day-to-day, real life, in-your-face experiential level are only really experienced by the under 40 crowd. The over 50 crowd, the only thing that they have contact with really is what they're getting through the news and Trump's tariffs. So Trump's tariffs are hurting us. That's the thing which actually impacts like the 401k of a boomer. And so that's like the only thing they think about, right? And there's also this sort of latent anti-Americanism that floats around in the Canadian body politic and has for years. And so for that reason,
jealous little brother there.
Yeah, there's the Laurentian elite in Canada consider themselves to be pretty sophisticated, and they believe that the prestige and influence that the United States enjoys really ought to be stewarded by them. They kind of see the United States as being the giant ox that ought to be, and that should pull the cart that they're driving in certain ways. So
we've certainly felt that.
Today now,
natural break there, but what's up, local? Like last couple lines.
Okay, so I'll just finish this up and then I'll hand this off. So the overarching point here is that in Canada, I mean, Joseph Heath said this best, that Canada's immigration policy has largely been driven by a desire of people not to blame immigrants because they look at Canada's story and think that, oh, we can just take everyone in. And they don't realize that at a certain point, if immigrants come in too large in numbers, they can actually subvert the entire system of cooperation which they are trying to join. And part of the problem is that and he puts it like this, for a lot of people who are pro unfettered immigration, the only thing that they experience when immigration increases is that the number of ethnic restaurants which they have as an option to attend increases. They don't have the job competition or the competition for entry-level houses and apartments or the increase in rents that occur. None of that, the crime, the fact that racial nepotism happens now where In Canada, it's well known among Canadians that once you hire an Indian manager, you get nothing but Indians at that establishment. Like you
Yep.
hire one and your whole workforce is Indian. That's like well known. They can't talk about it, but it is well known. So the question in Canada, and this is where I'm going to throw it back to you guys, the United States self-correct. Question
You
is
got to
what
repeat it. You got to repeat that. We couldn't understand you.
It's that Saskatchewan internet.
Got a Prairie Provinces rivalry there. Okay, well, Wokel is, I mean, he's driving. I appreciate Wokel Distance coming on for one of these. Obviously, follow Wokel Distance online. Check out Jeff as well. It looks like we've got Wokel back, so I'm going to flip to him for this last line here. Wokel? All right.
This is my last line is, I think the United States has been able to self-correct. Canada, I don't know if they will be able to correct in time, whether we're going to get a large enough number of under 40 people to vote.
Okay.
I have a question for you. I don't know if he's gone, but maybe Jeff, maybe you can answer this. How much does the average Canadian, how much news or how much do they follow what's going on in the States?
Well, that's a good question. I pay attention. I like to pay attention to the big three, which is my country, Canada, obviously USA, and then Britain, because we all seem to share stupid ideas.
Okay.
I know that we'll call them the over 50 crowd is probably still tuned into a lot of the mainstream media, although that is slowly changing. So I don't think much.
Well, here, let me ask it this way. I believe if you were to ask the average American who's in charge of Canada, name of the provinces, give me a series of questions. Can they sing "Old Canada"? What, whatever that litmus test is, you're going to get a super low number. And I don't mean any disrespect, but we just don't give a crap. We don't care about you. And I don't mean it in a bad way. We get your news every now and then, when Trudeau would do something stupid, or the Canucks win, the hockey thing or something. We get some basic news, or if a rivalry comes up, or if Donald Trump raises tariffs on you. But for the most part, we don't think about you. And I'm answering this. I'm asking this because of what Wokel said, that he doesn't know if Canada can correct. And what I'm looking at is this. We have a president that everybody gives a crap about. When Donald Trump opens his mouth, Canada better be waiting to get a peanut thrown into theirs, because what he says goes. When he talks about tariffs for Canada, your people better be paying attention. You can say whatever you want about us, and we just go, whatever. But Donald Trump says it, you better know it's legit. And I think the same thing's happening in Canada that's happening here, and I think it's happening around the world. Donald Trump has reached into the psyche of America at the deepest level. At the black folks in the hood know President Trump. They know what he's working on. They know what he's doing. And I believe this is all over the world. So I think there is hope for Canada. I think a lot of the movement that happened with Marine Le Pen in France is because of Trump. I think what's happening in Spain with the guy that doesn't like Trump, he's now suffering the consequences of his immigration policy. Look at El Salvador, all these places, Argentina, Venezuela, all these places are getting that Trump impact. And I think that Canada is feeling a lot of that, even though I agree with Wokel that there's a lot of disdain for the United States. I think it's out of pure jealousy, and I don't blame them. I mean, if I lived in Canada, I would actually be trying to get here or trying to emulate the U.S. as opposed to being upset about us. But I do understand the petty jealousies that come up, especially when it involves sports and you get a leader like Trump who says enough ripping us off. So I do believe there's hope. One of the other things I was going to talk about real quickly, back to what Wokel said about the emasculation of men in Canada, you can't get a good job, blah, blah, blah. Every woman, eventually, that pendulum has to swing back. There is inside of a DNA of a woman is the want of a real man, not a girly man, not a sissy man, a real man. And the guys who can overcome that will get that. And my son told me this the other day. He went to visit a girl. A buddy's living with a girl, their mutual friend, and she's on OnlyFans. And my son's like, Dad, this girl's place was completely laid out. She's Gucci. She drives an AMG in Mercedes. And he says, but you know what? I don't have any respect for her. He goes, that money's made on her looks. He goes, his buddy that is in his own business at 19. He goes, I respect this kid because he's working his butt off. He's doing it the right way. I think we've got men who are slowly losing respect for women, and they're going to want it back. And I think that pendulum's going to swing.
Boom. Okay, so a lot of conversations gone on so far. We've actually gone through pretty much the first hour here, so we're probably going to break some stuff into smaller blocks in the second one. But that's a great analysis from Wokel. And I mean, basically, you see the same trends in Canada, in my opinion, as an observer, although a professional one, that you see in a lot of the world, where older people are very satisfied with their country. This is like the post-World War II order, right? America, Canada, Britain, maybe China and Russia over on the BRICS flank. But a lot of these new powers weren't around at this time. You know, there's a famous quote from, I think, President Truman about why America was so successful following World War II. And it was, we're the only country where everyone's still alive and all the buildings are still standing. So this went on for a really long time. Like not the largest, the third and fourth largest cities in Japan and the biggest maritime cities were flattened by our bombs. That's the only way to make a samurai stop fighting. You know, so there's that older tradition. Then there are the younger people who are noticing, you know, out of 40 million people in our country, and I'm not a racist, 12 million of them come from another part of the British Empire that was a historical rival. What the hell is this? What's going on with men and women and so on? And Kevin, I agree with a lot of that analysis, actually.
Let me ask you this, Will, something you said. Let me ask you this about something you said about the difference in the ages. I believe in America, that 50 and above group for us who had it good, you know, back in the same time frame probably that Wokel was describing, we had it pretty good in the 80s up until the 2000s, I'd say. But then right post, you know, Obama and, well, I mean, we can get into the details, but I think we had it pretty good. But I find more older people in America fighting to preserve things for the youth than I find sometimes the youth fighting for it. The majority of things I go to, and Will, you can tell me your feelings. You're speaking a lot these days. I mean, the 50, 60 and older crowd is dominating these. And you look at the people, I mean, there's some young people, young fresh faces. There's some 40s and 50-year-olds, but it's still dominated 60 and above. And when you go to them, they go, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for my kids and my grandkids. Because I say it all the time. Look, I don't need to be in this fight. I can get out of this fight, go make a bunch of money, pulling up the race card and leave, you know, end up dying a billionaire if I wanted to switch sides. So I got to be doing it for a reason other than, you know, the death threats, the Uncle Tom, you know, getting called all kinds of things that we get called. I could take the easy road. So I do it for my kids and grandkids.
To respond to that, and first of all, Kevin, I agree with you about the bullshit that goes with being involved in politics, especially GOP politics in our era. Someone once sent a stuffed raccoon to my house. So I mean, like, that's the type of crap that goes on. But to answer your question, I do think one difference between America and Canada and the UK. And after I do this in a pitch for the company and shout out the comments, I mean, obviously I'm going to toss the ball to Jeff or Wokel. It's their country. But I mean, I do think that one difference is that the USA is, among the Anglosphere countries, among the Five Eyes, the most conservative usually. So when you look at boomers, they're pretty right wing. Like, if you ask a boomer in America, a gentleman over 50, do you support communism? The answer is hell no. Now, with the younger generation, we have a whole thing with John Connor from Super Debate, who I think is 29. It's superdebate.org. Great program if you want to go engage in competition. See if you're really good at arguing. I did one of their debates. But against Armin Domalewski, head of Liberals for Harris. So a lot of interesting people over there. Anyway, communism is becoming increasingly popular among younger men. So is a strong kind of Pat Buchanan conservatism. Quote unquote, boomers in America tend to be just solidly right wing, rock ribbed, often own land. That's a little different in Canada and the UK. So here, yeah, I think there is less tension across gender lines. A lot of that stuff, like a woman needs a man, like a fish needs a bicycle, I think was intentionally generated by the first and second wave of feminists to attack kind of the nuclear family. And last line, but Germaine Greer very famously said, it was Greer or Steinem, we can't let women decide they want to be happy, mildly slutty wives because all of them will choose that. Like there are enough eligible men that the top 60 to 70% of women will say, yes, I'd much rather manage a nice house, much less an estate, sleep with my own husband, watch my own kids, than go work in the conditions on a trading floor at that time, which is like a baboon pit, like Mad Men, guys smoking cigars. So yeah, that I think that was very intentional. We're gonna have to fight back against it. One of the companies doing the fighting back, this is the sort of smooth segue I picked up from Mario. Yeah. But it is the company associated with pretty much everyone you're seeing. It's unifiedsolutionsamerica.com, which sponsors these weekly spaces. We did move from spaces itself because we'd get up to what we have now, 600 observers or individual eyes, and they'd crash. But thanks to you for staying here, even though there's perhaps less direct banter. We see your comments. So, Faith, time for Alberta to secede. I'm going to put that on the stage, see what the Canucks say about it. But please comment more. We're going to handle those during the second half of the show like we always do. But USA, first really large anti-woke consulting brand, includes me, it includes Kevin Jackson, lengthy resume on his end, Colin Wright, Mel Chin, Jason Riley, Brooks Crenshaw. If you're interested in what we're doing, unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. You can invest. You can see if we're hiring yet. You can look at our white paper. Some of those have hundreds of downloads by this point. Check it out. If you want to report something about your company or shoot an executive to us as a potential client, we will reward you for that, at least the second. All right. So Wokel just gave a great sort of opening monologue for this, that older, younger distinction. I think when people watch the long form version of this, and it's a 2.5 hour show, there are going to be a lot of people nodding along with that. That's one of the dynamics in the modern world. Race outside of immigration is fading in importance, I think. So I once asked like an actual alt-writer on X, so like, what's up with all this crap? Do you think of blacks and natives as heritage Americans? And quote unquote, and I expected to win an argument in 2 minutes. And he was like, yeah, of course I do. Like, we don't necessarily like each other, but there are a bunch of people that have been in this country for 300 years. And then there's another mass wave of people that entered in the past 30 years. And the question is, can we reconcile those, or is there going to be targeted deportation of the second group? That is whether you think I asked it harshly or not a question in politics. Jeff, you haven't gotten to talk a lot the first part of the show. We all got assertive personalities. You're coming back. What's your thought on what Wokel said? How do you feel about, let's ask you, is it time for Alberta to secede? And then a couple minutes on what we just heard.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm a pretty chipper person for the most part, but I think Canada's screwed and Alberta has to leave. I say that because it's just the numbers again. What is it? If Alberta left Canada, the average Canadian would be poorer than the average Mississippian. It's the fact that Alberta is the only thing that's actually driving the country's economics.
Yeah, it's picking on Mississippi.
It is what it is. And it's crazy. So I don't actually get to see a lot of what's going on kind of in the rest of the world because we're insulated, because we have still good industry. And it's coming despite of what the rest of Canada is doing to us, because they hold us back, but we still fight through. And then when it comes to like on the gender front, on the sex front, like we have conservative women here. Like they're still there. They're looking for oil field guys. The oil field guys are still doing that. We have great industry. And then you see like most of the trades fly into Alberta to do their work. So it's just one of those things where like we're there. But on the greater scope of things, down in the States, I could see what you were saying, Kevin, about Trump talks, and then it's actually moving things. But every time he talks up here, all of our politicians, even Pierre Poilievre gets butthurt. So like our conservative
Pierre does, because he seems like he's a Trump. I mean, I watch him. He's one of the only guys I pay attention to. When he comes up.
He's not like the worst, but every time a tariff comes up or something, they make the statements. The Conservative Party of Canada makes a statement, and they say, "Oh, Trump's being unfair. Trump's being unfair." And I'm like, well, we've been unfair to the USA for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting is like, I think Canada's screwed because what we have is two rival factions on the left. So your NDP and then your Liberal Party. And I think a lot of our boomers are Liberal Party type guys, but they think that that's like just like moderately left. But the NDP acts as like a pole, and it pulls. And for forever now, since Trudeau, we've been synthesizing more left. And we just keep doing that over and over and over again. So that's why, like, even with Carney coming back, being a banker, a businessman, he still wants to stuff another 5 million immigrants in the country. He wants to do all the DEI stuff. He wants to have all the gender nonsense. he's running that program. I don't think he personally gives crap. I think he just is doing it for his own benefit.
Yeah.
But that's how I see it. And our far left wing is pretty belligerent, and the internet is really kind of concentrating that. And every institution that we have that is government and or education is all in on the DI stuff. I know I drove in Edmonton. They have the Alberta Healthcare Workers. It's like the nurses union as well as the the paramedics and the rest are under that union. They have the trans progress flag up flying all the time. The Alberta's Teachers Association, which is a giant building, they have the trans flag up as well. So those are just captured institutions. And the other thing with Canada as well is crazy is that for quite a while now, the fastest growing area of jobs is not in the private sector, it's in the actually public sector.
That's true in America as well.
I find it fascinating that this leftism, this thing that we define as leftism, has metastasized in such a way that it's identical everywhere. It's kind of like a plant, it'll grow and but they recognize it through DNA that it's a different species than the one here. Woke is a species that it looks the same no matter wherever you go. It's weird.
Yeah.
And it's not like, in other words, if I went to Canada and said, what does the the crazy, part of the LGBTQ community look like there? It looks just like the one here. There's no difference in the DNA. And that to me tells me that probably a lot of that USAID money, which, by the way, if you guys didn't hear, one of the ladies who was dismissed from USAID made the comment that $43 billion was only 0.007% of the US budget. And why would we get rid of this when it was such a small amount? And that tells you all you need to know. When somebody says $43 billion, it's like a pittance. Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we keep it going? And when I look at where that money went through, and I'm just talking about our side here, I'm not sure any of it went to Canada, but I know where it did go. I see the same DNA in all these different things. And it makes me understand that this is a cabal. This isn't by accident that this is happening.
So
I agree.
I want to toss in on something that you said, Kevin. Canadian academia has been completely cognitively captured by American discourse. And this is something that they define themselves as sort of anti-American, because America is, the home of the George W. Bush country bumpkins and those ignorant blah, 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 right? But if you look at them talking about using the phrase like BIPOC, that was never a problem in Canada. Canada never had a large black population, and Canada never had slavery. Our identity politics always revolved around the linguistic divide between the Quebecois, the Francois, Saskatchewan, and everyone else, that is French versus English speakers, and also First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis, right? So the idea that Canada would even have anything at all to say about BIPOC is just completely insane. That is a vestige of the fact that Canada has been captured, like academics, those sort of low-rank academics who got educated in identity studies in the Ivy League but couldn't get jobs in the States, sought refuge in Canada.
You're exactly
right. They came here and they spread that stuff, and now it's all over. And one of the major problems is that how do I put this? In Canada, the anti-Americanism is kind of been harnessed by the woke.
Agreed.
And they want to harness that sort of, there was always a latent rivalry, okay, between Canada and the United States. Friendly, but there was always a bit of a rivalry.
Yep.
But they have decided, for whatever reasons, that they are simultaneously want to be captured by American leftist discourse while at the same time being anti-American. And that looks like a contradiction, but it's not, because it's actually the same thing that is going on in the States, where America is seen by the leftists as the source of all the evil in the world, right? Through colonialism and racism and blah, 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 blah. And so America is the source of great evil in the world, right? So we've been captured by an American discourse, which is anti-American, right? And that's what Canada's been captured by. And so all of this melds together. And so part of what the reason that Poilievre is in such a pickle is because Carney is so a word about Carney. I don't think Carney cares about woke.
True.
I think Carney cares about sort of 90s performative tolerance, sort of social libertinism, melded with environmental sustainability. And so Carney is going to, like, for example, Carney has decided that we're going to drop our temporary foreign workforce from 8% to 5%. 8% of Canada, which thing, right? That tells you something.
Repeat that. We couldn't, but you blanked out.
Oh, Canada has a foreign workforce, a temporary foreign workforce of about 8%. So 8% of Canada is workers that are either temporary foreign workers or workers on visas. Okay. That is a huge number. So they've decided to drop that from 8 to 5%. That means Carney's going to deport like 1 million temporary foreign workers.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
Is he?
The problem is he's going to go
pessimistic. Is he?
Well, yeah, well, that's part of it. He says he's going to. You can start to see it showing up. Like there certainly is. Canada is definitely losing temporary foreign workers. That's absolutely happening. But the problem is that what's emerging with that is a shrinking of the economy, because Canada's GDP was only sustaining the level it is because it was importing people and therefore importing GDP. Canada's underlying economic problems are now being laid bare, and this is going to create real problems. The issue is that the diagnosis of that problem isn't going to be, hey, look, we have actual economic problems, we need to fix this. What's going to happen is Carney's going to keep doing what he's been doing, and that is blame the United States for everything. And he's going to blame the Americans, and he's going to continue to blame the Americans. Canadians take any blaming of them. Obviously, it's not their fault. Look how great Canada was for so long. It's just this Trump guy. That's what caused it. No, what's happened is that the deterioration of Canada hit a critical mass, and now it's become obvious to everyone. And you're blaming that deterioration on Trump's tariffs.
I have a question. I have a question related to that, though, Mike. I have a question. So it's same thing here in America, right? The left blames everything on Trump. If a black dude gets killed in South Chicago, Trump did it. You know, it's literally almost that ridiculous. It could be policies that you know, people, oh, the debt, the national debt, and you're like, you do realize there was a debt before Trump came into office. So it's become just ridiculous. So here's my question: Donald Trump is getting vindicated on every level here. We just declassified information saying they cheated him out of the election and the Chinese were involved. We just had Fauci, one of them. He's the America's Mengele, as far as I'm concerned, with all of what's going on with COVID. He's been outed, and practically every J6 is being dismantled. We're learning that they make non-whites. A lot of blacks and Muslims and Mexicans are now white when they commit a crime. So it's now all white guys that are doing crime. Police stats have been completely misrepresented. FBI stats on crime. Oh, we're lowering the crime rate in cities. Yet there's, 10%, 30% more violent crime in all the cities, but supposedly they're all low. So the point is this: everything that Donald Trump has said about immigration, about tariffs, about getting ripped off, etc., he's being vindicated. My question to you is Canada recognizing this as well? Are they seeing, wait a minute, so Jeff's shaking his head. So Jeff, what you say no, huh?
The operation of blame Trump for everything is going strong in Canada. Like, even in Alberta, we believe that Trump has issues. And that's saying something, because we're like, again, Texas North. I don't believe it. But you look on the internet discourse in general, people have a really polarizing view on Donald Trump, and that it's even coming from your right wing for a bit now. Where they're like, oh, Trump's got us in these wars and blah 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 blah. And I think it's all psyops. I mean, you can buy Michael Malice's book, "Not Tired of Winning," his first 100 days in office and all the stuff he's gotten done. So I think that Trump acts as a really good foil, a really good heel, and that all of the left-wing people will continue to use him as that.
Well, I saw
advantage.
a video of a guy. He's a liquor distributor, and maybe you guys have seen it. And he flatly said, he goes, Trump's tariffs have nothing to do with my liquor going into the States. And he explained how he had to do it. And he goes, the tariffs that I get charged in Canada are far worse than Trump. So that's what got me to ask you guys the question. If that one, I mean, now he's a business owner and he's directly impacted. But for the average, I mean, let me put it this way: the average American who was anti-Trump is starting to go, wait a minute, we've got Jillian Michaels that said it. We got people talking to their Democrat politicians going, it's no longer Trump. So I'm seeing that sentiment play out here a little bit. And I mean, you guys you got your finger on the pulse of Canada, so I'm going to take your word for it. But I'm curious what would happen if Trump did gain some credibility.
So I don't think that's ever going to happen, but I do think there is something that could happen, and that is this. What is beginning to happen in Canada, because like we switched out Trudeau for Carney, at some point, it's going to be realized that, how do I put this? What Carney's doing isn't working, and the continued destruction and deterioration of the economy, grinding poverty, are going to force a change.
Okay, now that actually I think is a good kind of summary statement. I want to interject with a couple things briefly, and then probably back to Wokel, then to Jeff. But first of all, we're starting to get some comments in over on X. So John Richards agrees. This came in about a little more than 20 minutes ago, but agrees with Wokel and Jeff. You can't just blame Trump. These problems are long stemmed. A lot of this conversation so far has really only dealt with issues up to 2016. The basic issue is that the giant government liberal socialist model does not work. This is always going to destroy a middle class. It's also why you Americans cannot flee blue states any faster. And I'm going to read one more of these. Yeah, Trump is you see this in big American cities as well, right? Where you have racial politics, where people will say, oh, one of the issues with Detroit is that the tax base has moved to the suburbs. I used to play sports. I have a lot of buddies in Detroit. And if you come back to them and say, well, didn't they move to the suburbs because of all the crime in the city? That'll get into, well, how are we going to fight the crime with the white man in the suburbs? And you sometimes want to take one of these guys and shake them and say, this is a black city. You have a budget that's big enough to handle 85% of what you need done. Just fix the damn problems. Then you'll get people coming back in. But this is very common. So second point, and then I'm going to say something about the Wokel's great line. This is an un-American American discourse. Richards also says, now, he points out that Canada is richer than Mississippi, but he's making fun of people kind of crapping on Mississippi. So this is verification per capita income and GDP comparison. So you got Canada, $52,000 to $55,000. Mississippi, okay, $45,000 to $50,000. But then you've got France, $44,000 to $47,000. Italy, $38,000 to $42,000. Spain, $33,000 to $37,000. And Germany is doing about as well as our poorer states, and they're a smaller country. So shout to them, $52,000 to $55,000. So
well, that's why I was joking with Jeff that why are you picking on Mississippi? Because you got a lot of countries that could qualify.
I'd like to know where Singapore is at right now.
Oh, Singapore is they're in good shape.
Yeah, there's a lot there, actually. So, I mean, in the USA, we like to have fun arguing along racial lines. Our poorest state actually is West Virginia. It's not Mississippi. So there's always that back and forth between, like, you don't want to say a broke black state and a poor white state, but those two are usually bringing up the end. Then you have Louisiana, got Cajun community, great food, not a lot of money. So there, Kentucky, we're not a rich state. And a lot of the poorer states, by the way, are great places to live. Like if you live in suburban Louisville or you live in the bluegrass and just you own your own land, you're doing fine. And it's kind of hard to, like, what are your vegetables worth? I mean, like you're growing stuff, you own land, you own horses. It's harder to value that, especially if you don't like the tax man that much. The final comment from me, other than a note that if you enjoy this conversation and you feel the way we do about DEI and woke, you should definitely check out unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. Very possible to invest there. We love that. We encourage you to do that, obviously, if you can safely. Check out our white papers, hiring opportunities as we post them. Not a lot going on right now. but definitely tell us if you are working in a business that's dealing with these sort of issues we see in Canada, we see in urban America. We may be able to help you. And that ties into the final thing from Wokel. I think this, I may have cut him off at the end a little bit here, but this is something worth shouting out. Why are foreign countries that don't like America so enthralled to American academia to the point where you see George Floyd protests in Oslo, in Warsaw? What's going on with that? The answer, I've never heard it summarized that succinctly, actually. So shout to Wokel Distance, Michael Young, who you should check out online, check out his writing. But the problem is that it's an un-American or an anti-American narrative from America. So we are, and I don't even think the Canucks do this to the same extent. We in our schools teach kids our country is bad. Excuse my language, but imagine how stupid that shit is. Like, no Indian tribe has ever done that. We're telling people that we're a racist, sexist patriarchy. And Wokel, it sounds like you are going to finish up that point or respond to what I'm saying.
Yeah. So the thing is that whether anyone likes it or not, America is still the greatest cultural exporter in the world. And America's culture and its ability to generate culture is still, I guess, kind of second to none. And the infrastructure that it's built for the creation and exportation of culture is all of that infrastructure. So you think of movie studios, Hollywood, record executives, record studios, various forms of social and cultural institutions that would have been the governmental institutions that export culture around the world. So think of USAID, think of America Air, right? Radio Free Europe, et cetera, et cetera. All of that sort of stuff was hijacked by woke, which is a discourse of anti-Americanism. So the woke discourse of the woke anti-American discourse hijacked and how do I put this? How do I say this succinctly? The woke activists entered into and captured the American civic and social and cultural institutions, which are responsible for the creation and dissemination of American culture throughout the world, and used those things as a vehicle through which to disseminate an anti-American set of ideas and ideologies.
I agree 100%, but I want to ask you something, Wokel. I gotta jump in here for just a second. So I agree with you 100%. We exported anti-Americanism through woke. To your point, it got completely taken over. And so now we spew out through academia how bad America is, right? And so anybody trying to fix that, or to, like in the case of Donald Trump, who says make America great again, America first, he's now, when that's spit out to Canada and elsewhere, that it's now okay to fight against Americanism because the export that we just gave you was anti-Americanism. So we sold anti-Americanism, and then when we try to correct it, you're going, no, we can't. We're not going to let you do that. And this is where I come back to what I was saying earlier. I think Donald Trump has said we're going to take this head on, and I'll just use this number to sort of verify my point. When USAID got decimated, we stopped exporting woke bull crap, right? And so now we've got a Democratic Party that's broke. They are $2 million in debt. The Republicans have $128 million in their coffers. Now that's still chump change for politics here. But it's funny to me because people were saying Donald Trump is in he's hated all over the world, and he's down here in the US, his numbers are down. But then in the very same sentence, I listened to a political pundit on the left say, yeah, but Donald Trump's got a PAC that's raised $400 million, and the Republicans have $128 million, and the Democrats are negative $2 million. And so it doesn't jive. So I guess I'm back to this. If Trump is successful in doing here what he's been able to do, and he has won over millions of people that did not like him, 2.1 million Democrats supposedly switched parties during the 4 years of Biden when Trump wasn't even in office. So what do you think it is now? So I think it's even higher. at that time, by the way, same period, 2.5 million Republicans, people joined the Republican Party. They increased. So there are no indicators, no trend line showing that Donald Trump is lessening here. He's pushing the new Americanism back out into the world. And I agree there's some muscle memory and some lag on when it's going to take over. But I still contend that there are people, even in Alberta, Jeff, that still see Trump as not the enemy that everybody's trying to make him out to be.
Oh, I
One
think
thing that's one thing that's interesting about that, just as one line, then obviously to Jeff, but Trump is being helped by the Democrats here. So, like Kevin, I know you're a big Trump guy. I don't dislike Trump myself. I mean, I think the president coming in and saying things like, "Why don't we just build a damn wall on the border?" was a pleasant change from a lot of political back and forth that had come before. But Trump is a polarizing guy. Trump is his approval rating right now is 49% pos, 47% negative. The thing that's helping Trump is that the Democratic Party has roughly the same approval rating as herpes. And I'm not really saying that as a joke. It's like there's an annual poll. How would you feel about dating someone with one of these diseases? HSV1 or HSV2, whatever, was 21%. Democratic Party's at 29%. You can check that out. So when people think back to COVID, they think back to George Floyd, all of that stuff, they tend to kind of pin that on the donkey, if you will. So there's definitely a backlash against all this stuff. My own opinion is that if, say, Marco Rubio was as strong on it as Trump has been, he would have a 70% approval rating. Like when we do these focus groups, it's a lot of it is people just saying, I just want someone who seems normal, who's gonna,
I'm gonna disagree, Will. I'm gonna tell you, man, it doesn't matter, man. Whoever we could put Jesus in office, and you put an R after Jesus's name, and 49% of the people are going to say I like him. 47 are going to go, I don't like Jesus.
Well, this is what happened with Jesus, right? I mean, he irritated the local nobility and so on. But yeah, so I think there's some validity there. I also, though, think that gain in the GOP, you're right, it's very real. The numbers are correct. A lot of that is caused by the fact that the other party is seen as nuts by a huge majority of people over that boomer line, to go back to Local's theme. So among young people, you've got and this is just my estimate from an upcoming paper, feel free, methodologists in the crowd to criticize, but you got about a third that are just in the center, like I'm a patriotic American, I'm a little more conservative than like my mom who is a hippie. You've got a third that are almost on the alt-right, like the Groyper movement, so on down the line. And I think a lot of those guys are going to just calm down as they get older, honestly. And a lot of them are black or Hispanic. I don't think we're going to have a race war, honestly, if you look at who is an extreme conservative political activist online. Nick Fuentes is a Jewish Mexican guy from Chicago. So taking the dirty jobs that, a lot of people are hesitant to do. And then you have a third that are legitimate. And this worries me a little bit more, legitimate DSA activists. And unlike, I'll say hardcore guys, these people are very well organized. So like Chevalier is going to be in Congress. I don't think there are any Groypers in Congress openly, but it's an interesting scene. And so you've got the young split in three, and you've got the older population trending very heavily TradCon. One other just incidental note, other than that, you should go to unifiedsolutionsamerica.com if you enjoy Kevin's intense commentary, Wokel's in-depth analysis, and my own high level of patter and discussion. UnifiedSolutionsAmerica.com is sponsoring this. We sponsor every one of these weekly webinars. I see we're about to hit 1,000 unique on this one across all platforms. Brooks Crenshaw's streaming, couldn't be here today. Probably the usual 3 or 4. Watch that. Watch the full thing if you just logged in when we're done. One other thing, Kevin, when we talk about crime stats, I think we should do an episode on this, actually, because there is some hustling and manipulation. There's also the question of what a white person is. So, like, a lot of people online, and I'm not making a joke, a lot of people online, and both of us are black businessmen, are saying, well, these white stats, they include Arabs, Jews, Caucasian, Hispanics, Armenians. If I told that to a buddy in my old neighborhood that clashed with social athletic organizations from those groups, they would say, well, that's just because those people are just tough whites. You can't take all the white criminals out of the white population and then say, well, we don't commit crime. Italians, like, you guys got all those. You can't say that those guys are black. So what is a white person? And then beyond that, what level of fraud are we seeing from these urban governments? Those are both fascinating questions. Wokel, I think we got to burst in on you there just to finish that one up. Then we're going to go to Jeff. Solid 15 from Jeff on what's going on. Alberta secessionism. What should immigration be?
Yeah, I think what we're dealing with is with a problem of the capture of the cultural machinery that was used to disseminate American values and American culture. America is still culturally dominant and still exports its culture. It just happens to be that the people creating the people who were creating the dominant culture in America were creating anti-American culture, right? They wanted to replace it. They wanted to use They wanted to use the culture as a means to disseminate their political and social ideology, essentially. I think that this is beginning to come to an end. The stuff that was seen as sort of like groundbreaking and cool 20 years ago is now seen as sort of unbearably cringe. I mean, I watched this thing where Caitlin Clark, the white basketball player who kind of took the WNBA by storm.
That's a whole show right there, Wokel. That's a whole show.
But I just want to bring something up. The fact that you have to call her a white basketball player and everyone immediately knows what I'm talking about is part of the story. But the reason that this matters is because of one of these reporters went up to her and said, "Caitlin, what do you think of when your fans use your image to advance racism and misogyny and systemic bias?" And it just felt, when you were watching it, it just feels cringe. It doesn't feel like, how do I say it? Like there's this movement towards justice or that this is the hot new thing. It feels old. It feels decrepit. It feels, how do I say it? Like it's dead. It doesn't have the juice. It's got no more juice. It's completely cooked.
I got a question for you. So, okay, Jeff, you know who Caitlin Clark is, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. I would tell you a lot of Canadians know who Caitlin Clark is. But if I went into my neighborhood and put a gun to the head of all my neighbors, we can't name your best hockey player. Okay.
That's true.
It's Connor McDavid.
Okay. Fantastic. I'm a real fan of this soccer dude out of Denmark. I think his name was Hagelin or something like that. That dude really would impress me. But the point is, I wouldn't know him if he didn't do something, if he didn't love America and what happened with FIFA over here. But here's my point to this. Caitlin Clark.
I will say, you're a black dude that used to hoop, though. Like, how many hockey players overall can you name?
Buddy, what's his name? Orr and Gretzky. I used to know Gretzky out of Canada. I mean, he was he's a mainstream guy. The point is, you're following the WNBA, for goodness sakes. Most people, men in basketballers in the United States didn't follow the WNBA unless they had a daughter or a wife that followed it or balled up. We follow this sport because this girl is really good at it. And what we see is we watched her get demonized because of her color. If Caitlin Clark were black rather, she would be canonized by now.
Yeah.
We would be talking about this girl, putting her up on Mount Rushmore right next to Obama as far as the left are concerned. But because she's white, and here's my point, you guys know her. You know she's a good baller, but you know the underlying issues surrounding her, that it's all this racism. And that's what I'm talking about, that little worm that's getting into the psyche. And I don't think it's unique to Canada. I think we're probably talking about Caitlin Clark in Britain and other places. And I don't know.
But I think
I'm just to finish the point, I think that Caitlin Clark is what Trump is doing. I actually call her the Donald Trump of women of the WNBA because she's making people take notice of something that you normally might just overlook.
Yeah. And also, I think this dovetails nicely with the point that I was making, which is that because America's ability, how can I say this? Because America's capacity to export its culture to the world, and because America's culture is one of its most major exports, and the rest of the world thrives on it, your fights about WNBA players become news in other countries because American culture is just part of what happens to everyone else. Like in Canada, if Caitlin Clark played a game in Canada, that would be a major deal. Why? Because everybody in Canada is watching ESPN or watching Sports Center or paying attention to Twitter, and they're all seeing this debate about Caitlin Clark, and so they all know who she is. It's just part of it. So this is what I mean. Like America has exported its anti-American leftism to the world, and now that has made it somewhat difficult. What I think Trump has done in Canada is not going to be to convince people that he's right. I don't think that's going to happen because I think there's too much latent anti-Americanism that Carney has really kicked up. What I do think has happened is Trump has shredded the Overton window. And I think that Canada has loaded so much on of the blame. It's Trump fault, it's Trump fault, it's Trump fault, it's Trump fault. When Trump goes away, their excuse goes away.
Sorry.
And there's not going to be anything left.
I think there's one other danger, though. The other danger is as Trump gets vindicated time after time. Let me ask you that when the war, if the Iran war were to end today, with Iran capitulating, the Strait of Hormuz opening, what are the people in Canada going to say? You know, Donald Trump he claims he stopped 8 wars that nobody seems to care about anymore. But what about when he stops? Because I don't think anybody in Canada would disagree. They don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Maybe they do care, but or want them to have it. But I think most people would agree they don't. They do believe that Iran is a terror sponsoring country. So what if, and this is just a what if Donald Trump ends this war to the satisfaction of stopping Iran from building a nuke, stopping the terrorism, and opening the Strait of Hormuz so that the goods and services happen and the prices of things go down and oil goes down and things get restored? What then? I mean, how many things does Donald Trump have to do before the world wakes up and says, you know what? He's right again. He's right. Well, we're experiencing that in America right now.
I don't think he'll ever satisfy anybody, to be completely honest.
Okay.
You take a look historically.
Trump,
the U.S. imported 2 mobile suns onto Japan, blew them up, and then helped them with restoration. And Japan loves the USA. The USA helped win World War II, stopped and then helped with restoration of Europe. Europe hates the USA. Yeah. They're running a different program altogether. They have a European vision. They're the European Union. They're very more socialist, more globalist, import all this crap. And they get to blame Trump. And Carney, when he says that Canada's the most European country in North America, he's right, because Canada follows that exact same method, and we blame you guys all the same. So I don't think
I have a follow-up question there for you. Is that a reason for some of the tensions that we see in Canada? Like this idea, the question of, are you going to be part of, say, North America, or are you going to be part of the European post-American world? Like, is that a thing you guys think about and discuss?
I don't think we do. I don't think we do as a nation, but I do think we do through our politicians. Like, it came up since Davos this year. Carney had a speech at the World Economic Forum, and he actually brought up, and was probably one of the most honest speeches I've heard, but only if you know the actual history of how all this politics goes on. He brought up Thucydides' trap. And back in the day, with Kissinger opening up China in the market, Dengism and all that stuff going on, they were worried about what would happen as China rose in the world if it would cause a major battle. So now what we're getting is kind of a weird 1984 situation where you have like a European axis, you have your Russian, China, Iran axis, and then you have USA as the only other one that's kind of out there. So the way I see it is just that you have a very small faction, USA, with this very small coalition of people who actually just want reality. And then you have your UN, UNESCO, Europeans, and then you have your BRICS nations. And I think that's the battle that's going on right now. And Canada's chosen the side of the World Economic Forum, of the UN, of the UNESCO system, of the EU. And that's why I think even if Trump does get vindicated, which I think he is, and they put in, say, a Rubio, that what they're going to do is it's the same operation's going to go. They're going to start, the left's going to start attacking Rubio. He will be the next orange Hitler, but it'll be like, it'll be his slacks or his hair or something. And it just keeps going on because what they want to do is socially reify their own ideas. They're saying abracadabra. They're trying to speak this destruction into existence because they figure they can rule over the ashes.
Boom.
I think
that's a really good last line. If I could say, I want to shout out some of the people in the comments just to encourage people to comment more. We've got Anurag Batra, if I'm saying that correctly, asking, I think in response to Jeff's comments, I'm going to read both of those. How has Carney pushed anti-Americanism? And then he says, I think this is an international businessman in the USA, but I've talked with this guy before. I think Europe will soon go back to liking the USA unless Europe sells itself to China. And that's an interesting take. The EU is not a standalone power. They don't have a space station. They're not at the level of and I don't mean to insult Europe here, but they're not at the level of like America, Canada combined, Russia, China, India, maybe together. But so what's your thought about that, Jeff? And then Wokel.
It's possible, but I mean, I actually consider Canada to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative now. I think we're functionally China, at least for a lot of it. That's actually the opinions of a lot of people when it comes to why Canada's attacking Alberta's oil sands is to lower the value of them and then sell it out to Sinopec, which is a Chinese company, right? So I actually am pretty pessimistic. I think the EU would be more than happy to be part of China.
Okay, well,
so
what do you think about that?
if you have to, so this goes back to what I was saying earlier about Canada's Laurentian elite. Our Laurentian elite would be like the Laurentia in Canada would be like your Acela corridor, right? So our Laurentian elite is our sort of credentialed Canadian institutional expert class, right? Don't think like celebrities or pro athletes. Think like the people that staff and run our social, civic, and cultural institutions. Mark Carney is kind of like the final boss of that because he was a Canadian who went to Oxford and Harvard, right? Got his PhD and is now prime minister. Ran the Bank of England. Like he's like the final boss of sort of cosmopolitan credentialed elitism.
What's the best university in Canada? Is that McGill or?
Probably the University of Toronto would probably be the most prestigious university. I believe it was McGill has the best medical school. It's in Quebec. There's a story about that which I could tell later, but I want to focus on Carney. Because Carney is, because of his background, what you're seeing is a little bit of, to Jeff's point, he said like Donald Trump could like catch a falling toddler, and when the child cries after getting caught, they blame Trump for the tears. Like that sort of thing is true. And the reason for this is because the thing that Trump is the biggest threat to is, actually I can turn my phone on now because I'm home. Hi. The thing that Trump is a threat to is the ideology and prerogative of that institutional elite to determine and set the terms of the debate in the Western world. What Trump is essentially doing is saying, the world which you have studiously designed in your credentialed institutions didn't work. It has failed. Your multicultural paradise doesn't work. Your open borders don't work. And so we're now going to remove from you the prerogative to determine the direction for society. As such, Trump is a threat to the social standing, moral authority, prestige, and power of that sort of credentialed elite class. And I don't mean like engineers and doctors. I mean the people that staff institutions. So the guys who are executive directors at government agencies, or the people who run nonprofits, the sorts of people that work at, say, central banks, those kinds of cosmopolitan, multicultural, liberal left elites who kind of took woke in as like the next stage of the development of whatever, of society. those people Trump is a threat to. If they acknowledge that he was right about immigration, that would be a blow not only to their self-conception, oh shoot, we got it wrong, that guy got right, we looked really bad, but it actually undermines their credibility and legitimacy. Their claim to be the ones who ought to be making these decisions is undermined. So
Yeah, but
for a lot
that's
of these
true of
people,
not to interrupt you, Mike, but that's true of
Yeah.
everything that MAGA represents. I mean, they don't want to be wrong. They've been indoctrinating us for the last 2 decades. And suddenly
Yeah.
here's a guy that goes, hey, look at common sense. You close your borders. Do you lock your doors of your house? And
Yeah.
do you if I was in your house sitting there as a squatter, would you kick me out? Yeah. There's no rocket science to what Trump wants. That's the issue is it isn't about right or wrong. It's about how do you control the world and control the money supply. That's how USAID got $43 billion allocated to it that found its way back in this conveyor belt to the Democratic Party and made it to where you practically can't get elected anymore in this country unless you're woke. And Trump interrupted that, but he didn't just do it here. He did it in Italy. He did it in El Salvador.
Yeah.
He did it in Argentina. And it's spreading across the world like a beautiful virus.
Well,
You
reality
mentioned El
wins, right?
Salvador. I actually think there's a point there that goes to some extent beyond Trump, that goes into this anti-expert era with some justification for that Wokal just outlined really well, and that we're living in the major nations, including the USA and Canada. So, like, a couple lines on that. I mean, like, I have a lot of TERF feminists that are basically friends by this point on my social media, and their whole point is women don't have dicks. And so we got into this whole complex conversation about, like, what is gender, what is sexuality, men can be bisexual, all the non-binary exists for the past 20 years. And finally, a bunch of fed up female executives and homemakers just said, no, like, no woman, has a cock. And that's so obviously true that that's now a movement. There's an acronym, TERF, that we've all heard that I would probably look for before going on a date. That's the reality there. Like, Kevin, you mentioned El Salvador. Bukele down there, I think we're all fans of. What he did was just say, I'm going to break the gangs. So I'm going to ask Congress to suspend a few rights of habeas corpus and so on for a bit. You can like that or dislike it. But after that, if you're a young, male, obvious fighter with something like rape tattooed on your head, I'm going to take you and I'm going to throw you in prison because I think it's very likely you're a gang member. And there was this intense backlash to that where people were saying, well, what if a man just decides to tattoo rape and the number 13 on his forehead? And Bukele and the rising elite in Latin America were totally unsympathetic to that. Crime has dropped from, I believe, 110 murders, not crimes, per 100,000 people per year, which means you have a 1 in 10 chance of dying in a homicide during your life, to 1 per 100,000 per year. That's, by the way, that's a fourth of our murder rate for whites. That's like the 18th of our murder rate for African Americans. So a lot of people, and I think this was Wokal's point, are just moving away from faux intellectualism to logic. And I want Wokal and Jeff to finish points, but I will say, if you guys want to spend an extra 10 minutes on here, we could talk about the boy Jason Ardrey over in England, who became the youngest black professor in Cambridge history, basically by just lying. Like, almost all of his papers seem to be completely plagiarized. I haven't read all of them, but he also claimed to be the world's greatest runner. I used to be a track star, and I mean, just you run 20 miles, generally marathon, you take practice off the next day. This guy claimed he ran 600 miles in 6 days, climbing mountains. He had a fake route on his website. And I want this to be serious. I have an inclination toward humor and joking, but like, this was all just, he was a black guy, upper middle class black man, and this was all just ignored. He was hired and people were complimenting him on these sort of things. And finally, Nathan Kofnes, shout to him, he's probably watching this, published an article where he said, no, we can't let this slide. These are the obvious incidents of plagiarism. I'm a runner as well. No one runs that fast, and so on down the line. And now Ardrey is probably going to be removed from Oxbridge. But this is an example why people don't trust experts. Wokal, what do you think? Finish up that great thread you're on.
So I think this actually ties into Jason Ardrey perfectly. It's that the reason why our credentialed professional class has sort of lost the mandate of heaven is because people can see where they allowed their ideological inclinations and their social values and political sentiments to cloud their judgment. That they have used their professional positions as vehicles through which to advance their social values and ideology, as well as their own interests. Musa Al-Gharbi, in his book "We Have Never Been Woke," takes a sociological analysis of this, and one of the things he points out is that all of the social justice activism, I mean, it's supposed to like fix poverty and heal healthcare and end racism, but the on the ground material consequences of the social justice movement is the creation of a discourse and set of is the creation of a discourse and a sort of cultural real estate in which people can set up shop. So if for example systemic racism is the hot new topic, there's a whole bunch of books and papers and PhD dissertations that can be done about systemic racism, right? The hot topic creates a sort of space which can be filled by people who write books about it and who do activism about it and who get funding on the basis of it. And when we're all doing social justice, all of a sudden, things which accomplish social justice now become a justification for funding, for activism, for hiring, for the maintaining of institutions. And the result of all of that is that what the woke cultural phenomenon has actually created is a whole bunch of jobs for academics and credentialed elites to write about the topics which are related to and constitutive of woke.
Did you
right?
did you see the lady that they just got who wrote the book about the Grimkeys or something like that? And they found out that it was complete and utter bullshit. It was about these black women that did something, and now they're Tufts. It was at Tufts University, and they fired her. And you look at all these different people that the reporters that make up stories of this guy overcame and this black guy climbed Mount Everest with no legs and no arms and rolled him his way up, and just crazy stuff. And it wouldn't pass even common sense, much less peer review. And then somebody, a good academic, comes along and says, wait a minute, I call foul. And then you find out it's been theoretically peer reviewed, used in other stuff. Will and I have talked many times about these studies in academia that have no bearing at all on legitimate research. And then they find out later it was used it's been referenced 25 times in other people's academic work. And it turns out to be a complete pile of shit. Yes. This is what it's infantilizing black folks. And I want to say one thing about USA. Will talks about it in terms of DEI, and that's we know amongst us girls, we want to get rid of DEI in the sense, but I think the really big issue here is we want to promote meritocracy. That is truly what we're about. And if you coming to Canada, if you come into Canada and you bring something to the Canadian culture and you bring it with the idea that I'm going to assimilate into the greatness of Canada, whatever you define that to be. If it means I got to eat more maple syrup, fine, I don't care. But I'm going to come there with that in mind. But we're not doing that. We're saying, come here, become a victim of the colonialism of United States or Canada and all the white faces you see that should be apologizing to you, and then change us like we're some battered woman that's waiting for our batterer to come home to tell us how we feel that day. It's ridiculous that we allow this to happen.
I actually think that's a really good point. And I think Jeff has a comment there, but like that's actually worth remembering that none of us here is racist. In fact, we're two black men, two white guys. Our last guest was Lizzie Stardust, who's a former punk rock feminist who lives in a homestead in the woods. Like, as long as you can compete, I don't think any of us has a problem with the idea of immigration Indian Americans do quite well in America, where we're more selective. Chinese Americans built many of the railways. Now, my Irish ancestors would disagree with the common claim they built all of it, but we can leave that aside. But at any rate, no one has a problem with fairly race-blind immigration of quality people, which would bring in, by the way, about 50% Europeans. We make it very difficult, actually, for Brits, Canadians to come in. The issue is with migration is, does what we're doing make sense? And last line from me, but we could extend really any of these topics. Jason Arday, I'm interested in terms of the victimization narrative in the Canadian residential schools that claim that there were thousands of corpses found scattered around these prep schools, these are native boys in Canada. It just goes on and on. I mean, what is the purpose of immigration? I don't know if I said this already, but we saw in Spain today, we saw almost this Avengers Infinity War like scene where they removed one chunk of the barricade that prevents migrants from storming into the country. And they thought people would come across and they'd start processing documents or something. No, like 30,000 men, if I recall the figure, just ran into the country. They're all young fighting men. So now the Spaniards are trying to figure out how to deal with this. So a lot of narratives, I guess, would be the point come out of this. And yeah, at unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. The goal is merit. I do think one point in terms of Wokel working on our corporate merit index, the CMI, who's done a lot of work there, Brooks Crenshaw, you really can't have merit if you have an extreme external focus on something different. So whether if you're rating all black applicants ahead of all white ones or something like that. So we oppose that, but migration itself, that sort of thing, not always bad. The question is in practice. Jeff, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the most important part is kind of to always work towards the true, the good, and the beautiful, and do it from a reality space. That's what, when we talk about a lot of these leftists, these woke people, and the ones out of it in academia, like they don't run a realist system, so they do everything operationally, and that's why they all game the system. They can just that's how they win. So they have an exploitation type of methodology. And that's why I was just going to make the joke. Did that guy from Britain still keep his 900,000 pound a year job like Claudine Gay?
He probably will. He's probably going to be suspended. This would be my guess as someone who's been an academic quasi-executive. He's probably going to be suspended, but they're not going to fire him at Oxbridge. The thing with our day, and I want to hear what Wokel as an academic says about this when he gets back, but also Kevin, I mean, obviously I think you have a take on this. Jason Arday, if we're fully segueing topics, we just went through this. He's this British professor, claimed to be the fastest man in the world, said he couldn't talk till he was 11. He's written 10 papers that are pretty good publications. They turn out on average to be about half plagiarized. What's fascinating about this, according to Nathan Kofnes, who exposed him, or Kofnes, I believe he's of Greek origin, is that this was known for several years. It's described in the letter as an open secret on the Oxford campus. And it was also just evident. Like one of the papers he plagiarized is a really famous one about how to interview. I've read it. And so he took segments from other people's interviews and like claimed that they had been said in interviews that he held with his own quote unquote subjects. So everyone kind of knew this was going on. They investigated him, in fact, and they found that he'd made, they called it natural rookie mistakes or something like that. So that is the impact of DEI or non-merit hiring. Like it was very evident they didn't want to fire this guy because this guy was a black guy. He was a black Brit. And again, the list of things he said, I'll add a couple more. He claimed he played professional soccer. He claimed he was a professional level pool and snooker player. He claimed that as an academic who made early on about £160,000 a year, he'd given and raised $8 billion for charity, whatever number of pounds that is. And this was all just kind of ignored because he was a sacred person. Anyone can kind of take that from there if we're discussing our day.
He sounds like quite the bullshit artist. I'm actually I'm not even mad. I'm actually impressed if like that's all true. Like that's hilarious. But people like that, well, they'll take as much leash as you give them. We have that old statement, right? Like you give an inch and they take a mile, or like people fill the container. I just think that's actually hilarious.
I jump on the other side of this and just say this. If that was a white guy that did that, he'd have been gone. It might have been quiet, unceremoniously done, but he'd have been gone. I mean, you want to keep this guy around. You know he's a plagiarist. Yeah, okay, great. What did you do? What did you do for him? He's walking around campus. Everybody's going, yeah, that's the guy. That's the dude that plagiarizes. That's the guy that doesn't have the academics. He's our token Negro that we're not going to do anything about. And yeah, everything he says is a lie. So he comes up and he's having a conversation. You think he's got any credibility? None. He's a walking buffoon. And he thinks he's okay. He thinks because he's getting paid all this money, they think because they're leaving him alone, everything's good. When in fact, it is the worst thing you could do for him as a human being, because reality is going to kick him in the ass one day. When he's gone, when something comes up, reality is going to come up and say, guess what? You weren't worth it. And not only that, it's a terrible disservice to the people that come behind him, young Black people, because the next Black guy that is the next academic that goes to that campus is going to be, oh, we got another one. It isn't going to be, he earned it. He deserves to be here. That's the crime.
Oh yeah, they did it just to have the numbers.
Thought about law school. It looks like Jeff and Wokel, you guys are both going to chip in. Just a quick point about law school. That's something I always thought when I went to Illinois. A couple of my buddies made it into the Ivies. There's a lot of diversity in these brochures. So if you open like the pamphlet for Michigan law, it looks like the United Nations. I mean, there are members of Native American tribes with the full hair braids and so on. The only problem with all this is that to be a lawyer, you have to pass the bar. So in practice, what affirmative action does is keep a lot of those people there for 3 years and then fail them out of the profession. Like bar passage rate for Black men is around 56%. So you're taking these guys, you're making white leftists on campus feel good, and then you're saying, sorry, you're going into car sales. And you could have honestly just taught that guy those skills in 6 or 8 months at the start of that 3 to 4 year period. So that's my take. Either of you guys, Wokel, Jeff?
I want to add. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I want to pick up on something that Kevin said. He talked about how you get these papers that get written and they get cited all over the place. That's actually a very, very subtle point that people need to understand. A lot of what happens here is the generation of a body of pseudo scholarship, and that pseudo scholarship can then be that pseudo scholarship, that body of literature becomes a place where academics can carve out for themselves a niche and a place to publish so that they can get tenure. So a body of literature emerges about, queer theory, and we're going to do all of this scholarship, and we generate all of this nonsense scholarship that's nonsense on stilts. It's Judith Butler, it's Jack Halberstam, it's Gail Rubin, it's all of this stuff. And that body of literature comprises of a series of journals and a series of departments that, it is comprised of academic journals and then academic books that get published by academic presses. And then it becomes official, it becomes legitimized. And then contributing to that literature and carving for yourself out a space in that literature can be used as a way to get the sufficient number of publications that you need to get tenure. So if I want to get tenure in an education faculty, I see this queer theory literature, and I start writing about queer in the classroom and queer pedagogy and yada yada, and I can get 8 or 10 publications, and then I come up for review, and my colleagues who are maybe publishing in, say, math pedagogy or how to pedagogies that are useful for people who are blind or whatever it is, see my long list of publications, and they look at that and say, well, this all looks good, and then they Google the journal online or they look it up. Yeah, this is an official journal that's published through the University of Toronto, so it's all very official and blah, 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 blah. And this allows academics to carve out for themselves a space where they can operate, and it allows them to get tenure, it allows them to build credentials, it allows them to build for a career. And so a lot of what's happening with woke is woke became a way for credentialed people who couldn't cut it in other fields to have a body of literature where they could cut it and use that as a space to, and use that as a place to grab themselves some real estate. Use that as a place where they could publish and then get credentialed and then get tenure or at least justified continuing to be employed by the university in some capacity, even if they weren't tenure track, right? Those people, in all honesty, if you ever actually sit down, and I have done this, and read through the scholarship in, say, queer theory or post-colonial studies, um, you can see pretty quickly where if you read that and then say read, I don't know, the academic journals in, say, mathematical physics, it doesn't take long to figure out who has actually got the difficult work and who actually has the rigor and the intellect to be able to do that kind of scholarship. So my friend Neil Shenby, who is a kind of works kind of in the same realm that we do, he's a Christian writer, made a comment online. Neil, before he came in and started dealing with counter woke theory in Christianity, right, which is where he operates, Neil was a very, very well published chemist working at Duke. And when he started writing about theology and the woke sort of invasion of Christian theology, some of these people tried to tell him, stick to your thing. You think you can just come in here and blah, blah, blah. And Neil responded by very tersely saying once, I am very certain that I can get published in a social sciences journal. In fact, I will be getting published in the social sciences journal in quite short order. I'm sure that none of these people who are criticizing me could get published in journals of mathematical chemistry. So then Neil went and he did get published in the social science journal with his friend Pat Sawyer. They have a jointly written article. And I'm still waiting for one of these people in post-colonial theory to publish a breakthrough in, say, mathematical chemistry or theoretical physics. Like, that's just not happening. And so what you're seeing in the Jason Arday case is it's indicative of two things. One, it's indicative of the fact that these fields are ripe with fraud, and that because of their deference to people based on identity, how they won't question it. But it's also kind of proof of how easy that scholarship is, that you can essentially just show up, plagiarize and fake it, and learn it well enough in the course of plagiarizing to talk like you're an authority on it and be indistinguishable from everyone else. Because when I've watched interviews of Jason Arday, he is indistinguishable from the most rigorous post-colonial scholar, right? Like, they all sound exactly the same.
I don't disagree. I think it's funny. I have kind of a point on this that just makes sense. Is that normally we have our standard distribution, we do that, right? And when you do that and it's actually meritorious, what you get is a strong and robust middle class. But what we're getting right now with the scholarship, and I'm the only one who didn't go to university here. My PhD's from autodidact university, right? Is that we're actually getting rid of that distribution and we're starting to try to help these people. But what we're actually doing is facilitating the midwit. So I think it's really funny. And a lot of I've read a lot of the primary sources like Wokel has in queer theory, post-colonial studies, all the woke shit, pardon me. But it's like 30 jargon words and then it all runs the exact same program. It's pretty simple. And I think the numbers actually point out too that they're one of the lowest IQ'd areas of study, only to be outdone for being the worst as education. But that's one of the things I just really want to point out is that it's me. I'm a big critic of post-secondary. I love education. I think there's a lot of good people there, but you can go look up the H-index or the number of citations on Google Scholar for a lot of these things, and they have huge number of citations. So people just take that as being, okay, it's cited a lot. That means it's actually good and quality. Well, no, none of it is. It's all garbage. I'll let you guys get back.
And, okay, one response piece here, and then it looks like Kevin, by the way, had to take a call, actually, again, for Unified Solutions America, the sponsor of this broadcast, where we're currently featuring Wokel Distance. We're featuring Jeff, who is the owner of Correspondence Theory, Core Theory, CORR. If you're interested in debate online or, in my opinion, serious writing on these topics, USA itself is the first large anti-woke consulting firm. So we basically, in one sentence, want to rip a lot of the crap we're talking talking about out of big business. Most of it's been sort of inserted in there since perhaps 2012. And there are tools like trained AI, panel discussions for your head count and leadership, including myself, Local, Kevin, possibly Jeff, many other people, Mel Chin, that will tell you exactly what this is and how to remove it, so on down the line. If that sounds intriguing, Unified Solutions America.com, USA. Now, my own quick take on this, is, as an academic myself, is a fairly well published one. If you go on Google Scholar, I'm not in the top like 1 or 200 people. I don't think Local is. We're both pretty intelligent. Number one, I think, is Michel Foucault. Bell Hooks is like number 4. So there really has been a massive wave of not even Marxism. That would be an insult to Marxists, something I never thought I would say, but like lib-reb quasi theology into academia over the past 20 years. A couple points on that. Peter Boghossian, I'm not going to try to take credit for his term, but coined the phrase idea laundering to describe this, right? Like someone will write a small paper. Yeah, we've both read his paper on this, but like someone will write a small paper. Their buddies in some niche field like fat studies will cite it. It gets up to 50 citations, something respectable. That author is invited to contribute to new volumes, blah, blah, blah. And gradually you have an idea like oppressive thinness make its way into mainstream society. How fake is this? Again, another mutual friend of myself and Locals. I don't know if Jeff, you know him as well. You've published Lindsay, right?
Yeah, James and I've been bothering him for about a decade now.
Yeah, so okay, we all know James Lindsay, good guy. James Lindsay's launching a boat cruise right now. I'd probably promote it definitely would promote if I knew what boat was, which ship he's taking out there. But he's been doing a lot of James on a boat posting recently. Check out James Lindsay on X. He's putting coconut drinks in his hand and so on. Anyway, James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, in fact, and Helen Pluckrose. Yeah. Actually hoaxed a bunch of these journals. And they weren't small journals. When you're talking about Hypatia, you're talking about the one really citable journal in fat studies, you're talking about top 10 psych journals, by just writing bullshit and putting what one of you guys called 30 buzzwords in it. So like one of their papers, and then like last word of the episode to you guys, but one of their papers was a discussion of adding a fat category to bodybuilding.
Yeah, I remember that one.
One of them included the line, "Is the doggy position feminist for animals?" and was about how people adapted to dog park fucking, for want of a better word, dogs humping each other, sex beginning, a dog humping a leg. Was it affected by the fact that, say, one dog seemed to be gay? So they said they were writing a paper about the gender dynamics of dog parks. Another one, they claimed they'd gone to Hooters 600 times, and it was called something like the feminist epistemology of the breastaurant. Another one was a chapter of Mein Kampf. You guys might correct me on some of the details of all these, but it was written so that the word man replaced like Jew, and it was sent to the second best feminist journal. And all of these were published. There were others that weren't, but like 7 out of 10 were published in very major, impact index venues. Local, what's your take on that?
So again, this is exactly the same thing that I was making before. Is that it is the generation of a body of literature which is treated as it's the generation of a body of academic literature which can be then used as a place where people can contribute and therefore get on their resume a number of publications.
You know what it sounds like to me? Is if they're all citing each other and it's like this big circle thing and it actually increases their status as well as money and all that's going on. It sounds a lot like how all those South Asian accounts on Twitter all share each other's stuff and all make a lot of bank.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's incestuous and circular at the same time. And so what you end up with, there is, because of the underlying epistemological, ontological assumptions, or to put it a little bit more clearly, because of their understanding of knowledge and its interaction with reality, and because they take a social constructivist view of both knowledge and of truth, there is no way to ensure that the scholarship which is generated in these fields is nailed to reality in any particular way.
Well, they'd be
There's
anti-realist
no,
just at the heart. They're
yes,
effectively nominalists.
that's right.
Like,
They're
that's why I said
postmodernists.
earlier
You
today.
gentlemen ever read The Conceptual Penis? Just to kind of put a handle on that.
The conceptual
Yes.
penis. Yeah.
Dicks aren't real.
As a social construct. Yeah. And so because of this, there really isn't any way to call their bluff.
Okay.
I actually think that this is actually headed towards a collapse, though. And I'm going to tell you why it's headed towards a collapse. With the undermining, and then I have to go pretty quick because I got to hit the gym.
We're at
at
2
some
hours.
point
Yeah, we
tonight.
got to get out of here. But it's been a good long
Okay.
conversation. But Local, what do you say?
So here's this kind of the last point. The Oxford Handbook on Climate Change includes a really interesting essay by a guy named Timothy Luke. And I'm going to tie this all up. For a very long time, one of the things that critical theory and postmodernism, what Arthur Malraux calls the Marxist theology, or the Marxist discourse, or the Marxist as an adjective or Marxist as an adjective to describe sort of critical theory, Marxism, New Marxism, and postmodernism, the sort of cluster of ideologies and concepts which are related to and flow from various aspects of Marx's thinking, among which would include postmodernism, because Foucault, in an in an interview, explicitly states that he was influenced by Marx and sometimes quotes Marx without saying that he is. So he's kind of pulling a Jason Arday in a certain way. So how do I put this? So that entire milieu, part of what was going on in critical theory was they looked at the Western rationalistic tradition going all the way back to, say, Aristotle and Plato, and said that the entire Western tradition is in fact an ideology in the Marxist sense. That is, that the standards and criteria and the canons of Western thought are something like a false narrative that's being used to justify an oppressive set of practices. You might phrase it that way, to steal a phrase from a Joe Heath lecture, which is where I'm going to pull this Timothy Luke thing from. What was going on was, if you look at the 1960s when all this stuff emerged, they basically looked out at the Western rationalistic tradition, and in particular the Enlightenment, and said that the Enlightenment was really a group of socially and culturally embedded white males living in their white male culture that were declaring the claims that were attendant to their own perspective and viewpoint as sort of natural and absolute universals for everybody. They were in essence declaring that their perspective, and this is according to postmodernists, they were declaring that their own culturally embedded perspective was really something like an absolute universal description of reality. And so what you were getting was really something like a fraudulent, the Enlightenment, the Western rationalistic tradition, and the Enlightenment was presenting itself as a neutral, objective, absolute set of claims, when it in fact was a contingent, socially constructed, and culturally embedded set of claims that was in important ways socially and culturally relative. And because that was the view, it became central to critical theory to show that Western ideas, concepts, criteria, standards, and traditions were really socially constructed and culturally contingent, and therefore, and in some important way, relative, culturally and epistemologically relative. So there is no objective scientific standard which is universally and absolutely true. Science, then, is, like all other Western intellectual artifacts, socially constructed, embedded, and socially embedded in a set of institutions, and therefore, in important ways, socially and culturally relative.
Oh.
And the way that this is typically done is by showing that all of these bodies of knowledge are not sort of pristine and free floating in the universe, but they're actually created by people in institutions with interests, right? So what Timothy Luke does is, so what the critical theorists do is they have this entire body, which basically says that science is part of this oppressive Western system. What Timothy Luke does, and he's a postmodern neo-Marxist, which I'm assured that don't exist, but he himself is postmodernist and Marxist. He quotes them both. Takes this apparatus of critical theory, which operates by taking various aspects of Western society, holding them up and saying, this claim, which appears to be objective and universal, is really embedded in a set of institutions, in a power knowledge formation, which is embedded in institutions and which has its own interests and ideology at work, right? So he takes that idea. And the idea is basically simple. You take a body of knowledge, okay, science or theology or physics or whatever it is, and you say that body of knowledge is not really objective, absolute, floating above. It's actually embedded in a set of institutions and in a culture. And those institutions and that culture has its own presuppositions, assumptions, its own interests, its own perspective. And you use that to show, and then you claim that the body of knowledge and those institutions constitute a power knowledge formation where the knowledge is used to justify the grab of power, and then the increased power is used to justify knowledge. And all of this is used to benefit the interests or to benefit the people who are running it, and is used to serve certain interests, right? And that's how you say, look, science isn't really this objective thing. Science is a body of knowledge that was created by white people that was used to justify the Western rationalistic tradition, which was then used to increase the power of white people and so on and so forth. He takes that and he runs it against climate change. And what he essentially says is that the green global movement is itself its own power knowledge formation. The green global movement is itself subject to this analysis. And so he says, look, environmentalism is a power knowledge formation. All of the environmentalists work in institutions. Those institutions are doing what? They're producing knowledge about climate science. And that knowledge about climate science is used to justify what? Government actions, including the funding of climate science, which is then used to generate yet more knowledge about climate change, which is then used to justify taxation and regulation of light bulbs and blah, blah, blah. So all of this looks like it's a power knowledge formation. And all of this looks like you've got a set of institutions which are generating a body of knowledge which is used to grab power, which is used to generate more knowledge, which is used to grab more power, and so on and so forth, right? And the interests of the scientists are being served because they get tenure and they get their books sold and they get paid and they get speaking gigs and they get called into government to do important and influential work and so on and so forth. And so what he concludes is that the green global movement is really just generating its own form of power for itself and is exercising its own form of social control. What that means is that this is all collapsing.
Break there. I'm going to have to get out of the office in a couple minutes as well. Yeah. I actually think with two comments there, because I think people that watch the long form of this are going to be very impressed by the comments of pretty much everyone. But that's a great synthesis there as well. Basically, in a briefer version, the claim of woke people is that there's no absolute real knowledge. Knowledge is generated in the context of societies where people have different competitive dynamics with one another. Well, cool. There are 2 points there that I would hit on. First of all, the argument that all that matters is the social impact of something and not whether it's right is just wrong. There are many forms of truth. If you ever debate a logician, which I have, I've gone up against Jesuit priests and so on. I got smoked in that one. But I mean, there are certain things. There are demonstrable truths. Here's a board. How many boards do I have? There are definitional truths. If all snarks are snooks and all snacks are snarks, then are all snarks snacks. And you can follow this sort of step. That's how you can do mathematical proofs. I've seen woke attempts to challenge the major Euclidean and so on proofs. They fail pathetically. But so that's point one. And I'd love anyone in the comments to argue with me and or Wokel. But I think that second point, citing a scholar that you read pretty frequently, is also worth mentioning. If you work at fucking Harvard and you are a left liberal, and so is everyone in your department, and competitive dynamics in your department determine who's a dean, who's a multimillionaire, etc., you're also concerned with the, what did you say, construction of power knowledge?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not an
Yeah.
innocent.
No,
Yeah,
you have
you're
your
being
own
elected.
set of interests.
Yes. No, that's exactly right. And I think I'm going to give the last word to Jeff here. We normally go, everyone, myself, Kevin, Wokel, is capable of going into these issues, and Jeff as well, for 30, 40 minutes. Well, I do have to get out of here. I'm not trying to be rude to you, gents. I have to jump on. There's the last shuttle off the campus and so on. But Jeff, what's your final take on this? And then I'm going to give you guys contact information and so on, and we're going to close this one. We've been here for 2 hours, 10 minutes, good philosophical discussion. Jeff, what's your take on all this? Interest among the woke, so on?
My take is that reality exists, and anyone who tries to say that it's a parology, a social contract, a constructivist thing is running an operation on you, because they're definitely out for their own interest. And that's kind of where I want to leave it.
Boom. Okay, that's a great last word. Although both my piece and Jeff's piece came from local synopsis there. I mean, I think we all know the same thing about these issues. That's extremely well said. Okay, so this became one of our more philosophical conversations. We were talking about what's up with the Conservative Party in Canada, but good team of guys. Local Jeff, how can people get in touch with you online? We usually get about 5,000 total aftermarket viewers on this and so on.
Go ahead,
Wokel?
Vocal.
So I am at local_distance on X, formerly known as Twitter. I have a local distance Substack. And just to throw one, I know we're not supposed to do this, but just to throw 10 seconds, one more thing in. Right now, the big leftist move is sustainability and environmentalism. And their big line is 99% of scientists agree. You're not going to be able to keep that up when the major people you've been hiring for the past 20 years have been screaming about how science is just an oppressive social construct and been bad-mouthing science. And so you're going to start to see what Wilfred said, that competition for which is going to be who gets tenure and who gets promotions is going to come when the people who say objective science is climate change and that's why we need to do environmentalism start fighting the people who call everything a social construct. That conflict is coming.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. So that's one of the points of the kind of steel sharpened steel sort of conversations. Okay, Jeff, where can people find you online? Tell us about core theory a little bit.
Okay, so you can find me at my personal Twitter account is at unmitigatedass. We have fun over there. We talk philosophy. We cause trouble. But that's not what I'm here to promote. I'm here to promote correspondence theory, which is the Substack that I run. It's at correspondencetheory.com. You can follow us on X at Core Theory. We've published works from the likes of James Lindsay, Mark Changizi. He probably likes Dr. Mark Changizi, pardon me. Who else? Dr. Jordan Goldenstein. He probably doesn't want to be called a doctor. Courtney Turner, Christine Jones, Van Harvey, myself, hodgepodge of anonymous accounts, smaller guys too. We cover everything from deep philosophy all the way up to fifth generational warfare and some Canadian current events. Best place to read all that is actually at correspondencetheory.com. And that's about all I have.
All right. Well, thank you guys for that and for the conversation. I owe Core Theory an article myself, and that's a good segue into my last promotional piece. That article would be about Unified Solutions America and the idea of how you can actually quantify these ideas like merit, expertise, and so on. And I think that when we get into that CMI that Wokel and Brooks Crenshaw, who couldn't be here, are designing, and we move that a little bit into academia, and I'm going to help with the stats there, but the academic merit index, let's call it. I think if we actually apply that at the individual level, you'll find that a lot of these people that we've been hearing from for the past 2 decades are, in fact, what Jeff said, just overeducated midwits. To check out where we are on that right now, go to unifiedsolutionsamerica.com. For now, go home and spend time with your family. Have a great day. And thanks to you guys. I'm going to close this. Peace.
Peace.
Deuces.
In stream. Oh, that's how you do it. The big button.